Adapted from archaic translation by H.T. Francis and R.A. Neil. Jataka number 305. Silavamamsana Jataka. In truth there is, etc. This story the master told while living at Jetavana monastery, about the rebuking of sin. The circumstances will be set on in the Paniya birth in the 11th book. The following is a brief summary of it. 500 brethren living in Jetavana monastery, at the close of the middle watch of the night, entered into an argument on the pleasures of sense. Now the master through all the 6 divisions of night and day keeps a continual watch over the brethren, even as a one-eyed man carefully guards his eye, a father his only son, or a yakut's tail. In the night time, with his supernatural vision regarding Jetavana monastery, he saw these brethren, as it were, like robbers that had found their way into some great king's palace. And opening his perfumed chamber he summoned Ananda and asked him to assemble the brethren in the home of the golden pavement, and prepare a seat for him at the door of the perfumed chamber. Ananda did as he was commanded and told the master. Then the master, sitting down on the seat prepared for him, addressed the brethren collectively and said, Brethren, wise men of old thought there was no such thing as secrecy in wrongdoing and so abstained from it, and he told them a story of the olden time. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva came to life in a Brahmin family, and when he was of age, he was taught science by a world-renowned teacher of that city, being at the head of a class of 500 students. Now his teacher had a grown-up daughter. And he thought, I will test the virtue of these youths and will give her in marriage to him that most excels in virtue. So one day he thus addressed his pupils. My friends, I have a grown-up daughter, and I intend to give her in marriage, but I must have proper dresses and ornaments for her. Do you then steal some without your friends discovering it, and bring them to me? Whatever no one has seen you take I will accept, but if you allow anything you bring to be seen, I shall refuse it. They agreed, saying, Very well, and from that day they stole dresses and ornaments without their friend's knowledge and brought them to him. And the teacher arranged whatever each pupil brought in a separate place. But the bodhisattva stole nothing. Then the teacher said, But you, my friend, bring me nothing. True, master, he replied. Why is this, my friend? He asked. You accept nothing, he answered, unless it is taken secretly. But I find there is no such thing as secrecy in wrongdoing. And to explain this truth he repeated these 2 stanzas. In truth there is no act of sin, that in this world may hidden lie, that which the fool a secret deems, the spirits of the wood know. Concealment nowhere may be found, nor can a void exist for me, even where no being is in sight, while I am there, no void can be. The master, being pleased with his words, said, Friend, there is no lack of wealth in my house, but I was anxious to marry my daughter to a virtuous man, and I acted thus to prove these youths. But you alone are worthy of my daughter. Then he adorned his daughter and gave her in marriage to the bodhisattva, but to his other pupils he said, Take back all that you brought me to your several homes again. Then the master said, It was thus, brethren, that the wicked pupils by their dishonesty failed to win this woman, while this one wise youth by his virtuous conduct obtained her as his wife. And in his perfect wisdom he gave utterance to yet 2 other stanzas. Masters bad and low and easy and given to delights, and weak, for a wife, went astray. But our Brahmin, well seen in the law from his youth, won a bride by his courage in holding the truth. The master, having brought this serious lesson to an end, explained the truths and identified the birth. At the conclusion of the truths these 500 brethren attained to sainthood. At that time Sariputra was the teacher, and I myself was the wise youth. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by H.T. Francis and R.A. Neil. Jataka number 306. Sujata Jataka. What is this egg-shaped fruit, etc.? This story was told by the master while living at Jetavana Monastery, about Queen Malika. One day, they say, there was a dispute at court between her and the king. The king was so enraged that he ignored her existence. Malika thought, "The master, I fancy, knows not how angry the king is with me." But the master knew all about it and resolved to make peace between them. So early in the morning he put on his inner garment and taking his bowl and robes he entered Shravasti city with a following of 500 brethren and came to the palace gate. The king took his bowl from him, brought him into the house, and placing him on the seat prepared for him, poured the water of donation on the hands of the brotherhood with Buddha at their head, and brought them rice and cakes to eat. But the master covered up his bowl with his hand and said, "Sire, where is the queen? What have you to do with her, reverend sir?" He answered, "Her head is turned, she is intoxicated with the honor she enjoys." "Sire," he said, "after you yourself gave this honor to the woman, it is wrong of you now to get rid of her, and not to put up with the offense she has committed against you." The king listened to the words of the master and sent for the queen. And she served to the master. "You should," he said, "live together in peace," and singing the praises of the sweets of harmony he went his way. And from that day they lived happily together. The brethren raised a discussion in the Hall of Truth, how that the master had reconciled the king and queen by a single word. The master, when he came, inquired what the brethren were discussing, and on being told said, "Not now only, brethren, but formerly too I reconciled them by a single word of advice." And he told an old story. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was king at Benares, the bodhisattva was his minister and his worldly and spiritual advisor. Now one day the king stood at an open window looking into the palace court. And at this very moment the daughter of a fruiterer, a beautiful girl in the flower of her youth, stood with a basket of jujubes on her head crying, "Jujubes, ripe jujubes, who'll buy my jujubes?" But she did not venture into the royal court. And the king no sooner heard her voice than he fell in love with her. And when he learned that she was unmarried he sent for her and raised her to the dignity of chief queen, and gave great honor to her. Now she was dear and pleasing in the king's eyes. And one day the king sat eating jujubes in a golden dish. And the queen Sujata, when she saw the king eating jujubes, asked him, saying, "My lord, what in the world are you eating?" And she uttered the first stanza. "What is this egg-shaped fruit, my lord, so pretty and red of color, in a gold dish set before you? I request, tell me, where they grew." And the king was angry and said, "O daughter of a greengrocer, dealer in ripe jujubes, do you not recognize the jujubes, the special fruit of your own family?" And he repeated two stanzas. "Bareheaded and meanly clad, my queen, you once did feel no shame, to fill your lap with the jujube fruit, and now you do ask its name. You are eaten up with pride, my queen, you find no pleasure in life, go away and gather your jujubes again. You shall be no longer my wife." Then the bodhisattva thought, "No one, except myself, will be able to reconcile this pair. I will appease the king's anger and prevent him from turning her out of doors." Then he repeated the fourth stanza. "These are the sins of a woman, my lord, promoted to high estate. Forgive her and cease from your anger, O king, for it was you did make her great." So the king at his word put up with the offense of the queen and restored her to her former position. And from then on they lived amicably together. The master, his lesson ended, identified the birth. At that time the king of Kosala was king of Benares, Malika was Sujata and I myself was the minister. Source: adapted from archaic translation by H.T. Francis and R.A. Neil. JATAKA number 307. Palasa JATAKA. Why, Brahmin, though, etc. The master, when he was stretched upon the bed of death, told this story of the elder monk Ananda. The venerable man, knowing that the master on this very night at evening would die, said to himself, I am still under discipline and have duties to perform, and my master is certainly going to die, and then the service I have rendered to him for 25 years will be fruitless. And so being overwhelmed with sorrow he leaned upon the monkey head which formed the bolt of the garden storeroom and burst into tears. And the master, missing Ananda, asked the brethren where he was, and on hearing what was the matter he sent for him and addressed him as follows. Ananda, you have laid up a store of merit. Continue to work hard earnestly and you will soon be free from human passion. Grieve not yourself. For which reason should the service you have rendered me prove fruitless now, seeing that your former services in the days of your sinfulness were not without their reward? Then he told a legend of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta reigned in Benares, the bodhisattva came to life in the form of a Judas tree fairy. Now at this time all the inhabitants of Benares were devoted to the worship of such deities, and constantly engaged in religious offerings and the like. And a certain poor Brahmin thought, I too will watch over some divinity. So he found a big Judas tree growing on high ground, and by sprinkling gravel and sweeping all round it, he kept its roots smooth and free from grass. Then he presented it with a scented wreath of 5 bunches and lighting a lamp made an offering of flowers and perfume and incense. And after a respectful salutation he said, Peace be with you, and then went his way. On the next day he came quite early and asked after its welfare. Now one day it occurred to the tree fairy, this Brahmin is very attentive to me. I will test him and find out why he thus worships me, and grant him his desire. So when the Brahmin came and was sweeping about the root of the tree, the spirit stood near him disguised as an aged Brahmin and repeated the first stanza. Why, Brahmin, though yourself with reason blessed, have you this dull sense lacking tree addressed? Vain is your prayer, your kindly greeting vain, from this dull wood no answer will you gain. On hearing this the Brahmin replied in a second stanza. Long on this spot a famous tree has stood, suitable living place for spirits of the wood. With deepest awe such beings I revere, they guard, I think, some sacred treasure here. The tree fairy on hearing these words was so pleased with the Brahmin that he said, O Brahmin, I was born as the divinity of this tree. Fear not. I will grant you this treasure. And to reassure him, by a great manifestation of divine power, he stood suspended in the air at the entrance of his celestial mansion, while he recited 2 more stanzas. O Brahmin, I have noticed your act of love. A pious deed can never fruitless prove. Lo! Where the fig tree casts its ample shade, due sacrifice and gifts of old were paid. Beneath this fig a buried treasure lies, the gold unearth, and claim it as your prize. The spirit moreover added these words. O Brahmin, you would be weary, if you have to dig up the treasure and carry it away with you. Do you therefore go your way, and I will bring it to your house and deposit it in such and such a place. Then do you enjoy it all your life long, and give alms and keep the moral law. And after thus speaking to the Brahmin, the tree fairy, by an exercise of divine power, transferred the treasure into the Brahmin's house. The master here brought his lesson to an end and identified the birth. At that time Ananda was the Brahmin, and I myself was the tree fairy.